Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So, welcome everybody to the Wednesday meditation. And it's been an interesting week for Canadian weather. I think there was a few days ago I was planning to go to the temple in Scarborough, and I looked at the forecast and it said -40. I was like, well, I don't think I'm going to go. I don't remember ever seeing it be, usually it's not -40 in Toronto, but got the lake effect here. And then today is, I think, a +1 or 2 or something? +6. So there's a 50, almost a 50-degree difference, in a few days. And remember when I was training to be a monk, I was in my kind of novitiate years, and I was at a monastery near Ottawa. And at that monastery, you would stay in these kind of small cabins in the woods. And in wintertime near Ottawa, the temperature does drop to -30 or -35, usually for about 2 or 3 weeks in the winter. It's the coldest period, and it happens there. And be in this kind of kuti, and have to heat this kuti up with this wood stove. And so it would be like +40 in my kuti, because it's hard to heat it, and outside would be -35, so it's kind of this 70-degree difference, kind of between the temperature inside and outside, and would wake up and the temperature would have gone down to 10 degrees. So eventually the window actually cracked in that kuti because there was a big differential in temperature. But this is the way that it goes, with the changing temperatures. There's something that, actually I was told that this is one of the things that science has been more successful at predicting, is kind of changes in weather. They can look at the various weather patterns, and they know with a certain degree of probability whether it's going to be X or Y. Okay? This is something they can guess at. And this has been one of the things that they've been more successful at guessing, because many of the things that people want to try to guess, they're actually quite difficult to predict. Kind of many factors coming into them. But with the weather, somehow they've been able to guess it with a degree of probability. But still, we never know. Today is +6. I actually, I thought yesterday was going to be the plus day, and it was kind of minus. And then today was kind of snowing in the morning. And today, a little bit later on, is rainy. And all of these kind of things are quite difficult to know. Even if the weather forecaster says that it's going to be a really rainy day, quite often. Yeah, if you need any more cushions or something, no problem. Yeah? Okay. Quite often the weather doesn't behave the way that we expect. So I remember there was this one time I was at a monastery in California, and I personally have a really strong liking for hot weather, kind of the way my body operates. I actually almost never get too hot. People complain about the heat. I actually, it'd be like +40, and I probably would still. That might be when I get close to saying, okay, it's getting a bit too hot, but that's it. And maybe below 25, can kind of feel the temperature myself. But I was at this monastery in California one time, and this was a monastery with a lot of people from like a Northern European background, and whenever it would get hot, they'd all be complaining. Like, oh man, it's terrible. And I would be really happy. I was like the only one in the monastery who was happy, and everybody could tell. You kind of can't hide it. Like, okay, yeah, it's the desert. It's nice and hot. It's going up to plus 28 today. Everybody else is like, I'm going to get in my ice cold bathtub. I was walking outside with a hat on. But anyways, I think the chief monk saw that I was getting really happy about the weather. And I think other people were kind of getting annoyed that I was so happy because they weren't feeling the same. And he gave this talk about how we shouldn't get attached to the weather. It was kind of I knew who he was talking about. It was obvious enough. I think maybe other people did too. The only guy who's happy in the monastery, it's plus 30. The talk is probably about him. So after that, I muted my happiness whenever it got hot, and those talks eventually stopped. Kind of hit it. But that senior monk, he had a good point. It was kind of this aspect to the weather. It was kind of that is reflective of many of the things that we'd encounter in our life. And kind of actually, oftentimes there's this idea that we can set things up in such a way that they'll turn out in the way that we want. We set them up in the way that we want, then they should turn out in the way that we expect, in the way that one expects. Okay, this is actually possibly has this kind of connection to the way the success of the mechanical sciences. We turn the car on, and the car just works. We can fly airplanes across the world, and all this comes about through this spectacularly successful manipulation of natural forces and cause and effect relationships, to the point where we live in an age of comfort, kind of unparalleled comfort, more comfort than the greatest kings of ancient Sri Lanka, and in some ways, the greatest kings of Europe. They would probably trade their kingship right now to leave their drafty halls eating stored up salted food, wherever they were, to come to Canada in the middle of the winter and enjoy a thermostat-regulated room with fresh produce from all over the world that you can just walk to the store and get. Everybody has as much as they want of it. So this kind of manipulation of causes and effects has been so successful. And it kind of embeds in one's mind that if one puts the right causes into place, one plans the proper way, then things should come. Things should turn out the way that one plans. And there's a set program. This is how things are going to be this year. This is how things are going to be next year. This is how things are going to be the year after, etc., etc. My life is going to be like X in this block of time. When I'm in my 20s, in my 30s, it should be like this. In my 50s, it should be like this. In my 70s, it should be like this. And I don't know what's going to happen after 70s. Who knows? But all these things tend to happen because there's actually, when we look at it, the probability is that if we live a typical life, they will happen. That's the probability. If a person, say, goes to university for accounting, probability is they're going to make X amount of income. If a person is healthy and runs every day, doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, probability is they're going to live to age X, Y, Z. 85? Probably live a long time, right? That's the probability. Maybe 70% probability of doing that. And this is a bit like a weather forecast. Kind of these things, these causes are in place, and we can guess at them. We put them into place, and we can guess at their outcome. But we can't guarantee the outcome of any of the causes that get put into place. Actually, interestingly enough, I was talking to a doctor friend of mine, a couple of doctor friends of mine. And doctors are really interesting people to talk to because they see a lot of the different sides of the probability of the human condition that other people might not. And they were telling me about another friend of theirs who's a doctor. Not to make all these stories sad, there's many, many kind of flip side stories. But they were telling me about a story of a friend of theirs who's a doctor. He's a very healthy man and has been running his whole life. He's a doctor, has not been to a doctor in 3 or 4 years. And this year they found a golf ball sized tumor in his brain that they couldn't predict. And so that particular doctor now has 1 year to live. Although the probability was that he would not, get that, given his situation. And also, I had a friend of mine recently, she went to school for accounting, and after her job in accounting, or after school, she graduated and got a good job in accounting, kind of as an accounting consultant, and was immediately paid $100,000 a year, which is a pretty good amount of money after school. But then 1 year later, that company, I guess, did something and they laid her off, and then she went and became an Arctic tour guide. So not the most, I think hearing about my preference for heat, that would be something that I would do, but, that's what she did. And so this was not a probable thing, not something that people could predict, And similarly, there are many kind of flip side stories. People read these kind of books, like Chicken Soup for the Soul. I don't know if anybody ever used to read these books like Chicken Soup for the Soul. Very kind of a heartening story, kind of people who probability would be, with the causes and effects in these people's lives, that they would be headed for a disaster. They would be headed for a terrible downturn. Actually, a relative of mine got sick one time, and a friend of mine sent me this story about a fellow who's Greek. And he was living in New York and, living a very busy life. And this fellow got diagnosed with cancer. And the doctor said, okay, you've got a year to live, and that's it. And so he said, okay, well, I've got a year to live. I'm gonna go back to Greece, and see my family, be with my family. And so he went back to Greece, and he was feeling kind of, sick. He's got cancer, terminal cancer. And then one of his friends would go invite him out for tea. And so he'd say, okay, yeah, I'll come out for tea. They'd take him out for tea. And then a little bit later, another one of his friends came by. Hey, you want to go out for tea? Or wherever they do, play chess or something. They have this kind of very communal culture on this particular island in Greece. So he went out. And after a couple weeks, he started feeling good enough to plant some food in his garden. But he didn't think he would live to see that food grow. But then he kept going, and spring came around, and he was able to harvest the fruits of his garden. And that was 30 years ago. Something like that. So the end of the article goes, well, what do your doctors think about this? And he says, I don't know, they're all dead. So he outlived his doctors. And the point of that article was that a person's environment has a big effect on their health. But this person was diagnosed with a very low probability of survival. And actually, another case that I heard of, when I was in Thailand one time, there was a monk actually, and he was in his 60s, and he was on his way to, this is a true story by the way, he was on his way to Bodh Gaya, to the holy sites. And just before he left, he went to see a doctor. And they had excellent medical care for monks in Thailand. And the doctor said, you've got terminal cancer, you've got 3 months to live. And so as he was leaving, he overheard the doctor say, I saw somebody else with this cancer, and they were dead really fast. Something like that, like they had 3 months. So this monk went to Bodh Gaya, and he was there for a while, for a couple of months. He just decided he was going to go anyway, if this was the end of his life. And he returned from Bodh Gaya, and his cancer was gone, without a trace. Absolutely no trace of his previous cancer. Now, I'm not saying that to say to people who are sick to go to a holy place that you'll be healed, but this was a case where I was there. I know that the monks weren't lying. I know what happened. He had terminal cancer. He went to Bodh Gaya, and the cancer was gone. So that's something that nobody would expect. Kind of a bit of probability that we couldn't plan for. And so this aspect of our life, this aspect of our practice that we can't plan for, this part that we can't put into effect, this is the part of the practice in the West that can be tricky. If we're raised in a culture where from day one we learn to plan, which is a very good skill, by the way, kind of a wisdom-based skill, learn to put the causes into place to achieve goals in the future, it can be tricky to navigate the areas of life where plans don't turn out the way that they should. Where everything that I've done should be leading to this outcome, and I got a different one. This is not the way it should be. And it can seem very unfair. I put all these plans into place. They didn't turn out how I should. So the Buddha's teaching on karma is actually a little bit different than this pure materialist teaching, a pure teaching of cause and effect. In other words, we set a ball rolling in a totally empty space. If we set a ball rolling with X amount of force, it should knock this other ball and hit it into the pool pocket. But of course, in the real world, there's no totally empty space without other forces at work. There are always other forces at work. In the real world, there's the cloth on the billiard table, there's the nub of the end of the pool stick, there's the mood of the person shooting the billiard ball, there's the skill involved with the person shooting the billiard ball, there's the environment outside that can distract that person. All these things are factors that complicate a cause and effect relationship, things beyond our control. So the Buddhist teaching on this is not that everything that happens to us we can control. And this is why there's two faculties. There's the faculty of what they call panya, or wisdom, and there's also this faculty of saddha, or faith. Now this word faith in the West got a kind of bad rap at some point. People, I remember when I was growing up, I always had this idea like faith, is not good. If you have faith, it means you're incredulous, means that you believe whatever somebody tells you to be true, and whatever happens, then you just believe it. Somebody tells you something, you go with them, and you're lacking wisdom. In other words, I thought at that time that faith was this refuge for the weak-minded. And this is a kind of common theme in Western culture, which is why we have this phrase from Karl Marx that says religion is the opiate of the masses. In other words, people have this unquestioning faith in things they're told because they can't face up to the truth. But in Buddhist teaching, it actually works in a more nuanced way, a more complicated way. There are these aspects of our experience that we can manipulate, that we can change. And that's obvious for us. Most of the time, if a person goes to accounting school and gets an accounting degree, then they will likely get an accounting job and stay in that job for some time with good earning potential. Most of the time, if somebody exercises, eats well, all these various things, then that person will live a very long and healthy life. These kind of things happen. But then there's this other part of the Buddhist teaching about karma where it's not just the immediate causes we put into place. In other words, it's not just the first shot of the billiard ball. It's kind of like the immediate cause. A guy hits the billiard ball, right? That's the immediate cause. There are also causes coming in from the past, and we don't know what they are. Have no clue what they are. So in the Buddhist teaching, there's not just this life, not just these actions we're taking now, there's actions we've taken before in our life, there's actions we've taken in other lives, and these things incline our mind in a particular direction. That's why there's this famous quote in the Dhammapada that all things are led by mind, created by mind. Speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness will follow you like your shadow unshakable. Now, the way that this is practiced well isn't to get nervous about things that we can't change. But it's to have this kind of knowledge. Look, there's things in the past that are ripening now. I don't know what they're going to be. But if I put the right causes into play right now, then in the future, those will ripen in ways that are beneficial for me. They might not ripen in ways that I expect. They might not ripen when I tell them to, but at some point, they'll ripen. And right now, they make me happy. And this is where this aspect of faith comes into play in a person's practice. And this is actually a very, very important aspect of a person's practice. Buddhism, in a Buddhist practice, in any type of practice, we can't just discover every single thing ourselves. Unless you become a Buddha. It takes a really, really, really long time. And actually, this is something we take for granted. We all don't know how our car, maybe some people here know every in and out of the car, how our car works. But actually, we have faith in the car. We have faith in the science that creates the car. That when we get in this car, turn it on, and drive it, it'll go. Although we have no clue how it works. This is a faith that gets confirmed through observation. In other words, it's not a blind faith. We didn't just look at a cardboard box and be like, okay, this guy sold me a cardboard box for $30,000. He said I'll get in it and it'll go. Let's hop in. Not going anywhere, right? We've seen people driving cars probably for most of our life. We understand that there is the possibility to learn the mechanics behind these cars. We've seen airplanes fly, we've seen all these things. So it's reasonable to have faith in the automakers, the makers of these cars, that this car will go where it says. And in the same way, we can gain this kind of faith in our Buddhist practice. In other words, faith and wisdom in our practice of meditation intertwine. Seems like a bit of a paradox. How do faith and wisdom kind of go together? But actually, in the Buddhist practice, they don't necessarily get separated. We gain faith in the Buddha and his teachings through practice. In other words, we come to meditation. We have to have some faith even to come to a meditation class. You might have heard it from a scientist. Meditation seems to release extra endorphins. We have faith in that scientist. We come to meditation class. And when we meditate ourselves, that's when our faith in that scientist gets confirmed. If we leave the meditation, we know our thoughts are not racing as much. They're not as fast. They're slowing down. The things that used to throw me off so much don't throw me off. This is when we get a little bit of faith and we can explore further. We can go a bit further. In other words, one's abilities expand. It's like somebody who tells us, look, this car works, hop in it, it'll go. We've never seen a car before. But we look at the car and then we hop in it, it goes a little ways. We think, well, I don't know if it's going to carry me all the way where I'm going to go. So then we can ask more questions. Well, how does this work? And the person tells us an engine. How does the engine work? Well, through internal combustion. What's internal combustion? Well, there's gas that gets fed into the engine, and there's small explosions that drive these pistons up and down, and that turns the whole thing, and that turns the wheels. And it makes enough sense. But when we get into this car ourselves and drive it many times, that's when we have a faith that's confirmed. And the same thing happens with our Buddhist practice. The more that we practice this, the more that we penetrate his teachings, the larger our ability becomes to verify them. And then, past a certain point, we stop wanting to waste time verifying everything. Imagine how long it would take if we wanted to drive a car and we had to know how every single thing in the car worked. We could just never get anywhere. If we wanted to fly a plane, but before we flew the plane, we'd be like, okay, I have to know every in and out of this aspect of how that plane works. We'd have to take a lot of degrees to learn all that, Not just degrees in aeronautical engineering, we'd have to get degrees in metallurgy, how the metals in the plane work, have to get degrees in kind of weather. Don't trust that this isn't, somehow being upheld by wind currents. In other words, it would be too much time to learn all these things, when our goal is really just to get to our destination. And so it's the same thing in our Buddhist practice. As our ability to confirm these things expands, we stop wanting to confirm everything. We have a goal to our practice. The goal of our practice is to find a happiness that doesn't change. And we want to go towards that goal. We don't want to dilly around too much. Of course, at first, we have to confirm this ourselves. But the benefit of this kind of faith arising is that there's things in the Buddhist teaching that take a long time to confirm. One of these things is the teaching on karma. This is something that we can gain an intuitive grasp of when we keep practicing good things over and over again. Keep practicing giving over and over again. And then things happen in our life that we couldn't plan for. Just couldn't have done those. We couldn't know where those things came from. But then somehow asking ourselves the question, where did this come from? Sometimes the answer can arise in one's mind. Look, this came from these actions that I did. One can have this kind of intuitive grasp that, look, what's happening to me right now is a result of these actions that I took before. This kind of feeling that arises in a person's heart. Now, the nice thing about this is that no matter how dark a person's day may be, no matter how rainy a person's day may be, it's like the weather. A person knows about the patterns of weather. We don't have to study it all. Just have enough faith. Look, this weather is going to change if the right causes get put into place. Although it's rainy today, the right causes get put into place, the rain will stop. And in the same way, even if we try to plan for everything in our life to go a certain way, and then it doesn't. When we have this kind of faith, we know, look, even if things aren't going the way that I planned right now, a lot of unexpected things can happen for somebody who does good deeds, for somebody who practices, for somebody who perseveres. And so when a person sets out to practice in this way, even in the most difficult times in their life, sustained by this faith in goodness, the amazing thing that happens is one day these actions ripen. One day, in ways that are unexpected, things come together in ways that one couldn't predict. I actually knew this monk one time. He was a Thai monk, and I didn't know much about him. But everybody who met this monk wanted to give him things. He was, wherever he went on like the most trips out of any monk I ever knew. Sometimes he would go to Thailand, and somebody from Thailand would invite him to Boston for 2 weeks. And then he'd fly back to Thailand, and he'd come to Canada, and he'd go to Boston, and the ambassador, the Thai ambassador would randomly invite him on a monastery tour. And then when I was around him too, I was like, oh, what can I give him? I want to give him something. Everybody was like that to this monk, And then later I learned about this monk's history. He was very kind of, very unassuming monk. And what he said was, he's like, yeah, when I was a layman, these forest monks used to come by my house. They'd have their gluts, and I would always take their gluts and I would fix them. And it turned out he was doing this a lot, like all the time. And then he started renting these coach buses. And he would, for free, drive all these people. He himself would pay for the bus and would drive all these people all around to visit the various kind of holy sites in Thailand. And then one day, things ripened for him, and he ended up becoming a monk. And so you can't help thinking when you hear a story like this, that this person's good deeds eventually bore fruit. And then seeing the amount of people who offered him things was kind of the fruits of this monk's generosity. Of course, could not plan for that. Now, this may sound like it's something that's impossible, giving a cause and effect relationship, but actually, even in science these days, they have a lot in quantum physics about the way that these kind of separate particles kind of connect up in very mysterious ways, and spontaneously things that are separated can come together. So who knows exactly the way that this works? But this is the Buddha's teaching on karma. In other words, we put the right causes into place. Although we can't predict when they'll ripen, the day comes when they do. It's a bit like growing a fruit tree. This is an analogy the Buddha gives. It's kind of a farmer who keeps watering his crops. They plant the seeds and water them. They don't know, look, in 3 weeks' time this tree is going to bear fruit. But they know, if I keep watering, then the day comes when eventually some of these seeds that I plant will bear fruit. At the beginning, this is sustained by faith. There's nothing in the ground. When the shoot comes up, then they get a little more confidence. When the tree grows and bears fruit, they really see that they're on the right path. And when the fruit grows and they taste it, then they know for themselves that this is the way, that this is the taste of that fruit. And in the same way, the Buddha's teaching, our practice of meditation, it starts with wisdom. It starts with faith. Joined together, working in tandem. It starts with these things to plant the seeds of goodness in our life, regardless of where our life is right now. It doesn't really matter where our life is. We can always plant these seeds. There's nothing that can stop a person intent on planting good karmic seeds unless they have a very bad obstruction from planting them. Even tied up, even on a person's deathbed, they can cultivate good thoughts. There's nothing that person can do to stop them from doing that, except make them comatose, I guess. When these kind of seeds get planted, when they water, then they start to grow. And when a person sees these shoots, they see the benefit of their meditation practice, that's when their faith starts to get confirmed, that this is the right way. This is a way that leads onwards to more peace. And so they practice further. They extend their abilities. They extend their testing of the Buddha's teaching. They branch it out. What else can I see as true? What else do I have doubts about? What else can I clear up? And with their new power, with their new abilities, whatever the skills they've gained in concentration, whatever skills they've gained in wisdom, they test those things out. And their tree grows. Right? And the day comes when they see the fruit on their tree. Their mind can drop into states of calm, have feelings of bliss that they've never felt before. And the Buddha's teaching is actually to go beyond all of this, even these states of calm, even beyond good actions, even beyond karma itself, to find something that's beyond conditions. And this is the taste of the Buddha's teaching. So they call the taste of the deathless, touching the deathless with one's body. And this is the whole point. This is the goal for which we meditate. It's a reason for which we gain faith. It's a reason for which we try to go forward. It's just for this, to find a happiness that doesn't change. And this happiness is a possibility for the people who practice. Okay? So I think I'll leave that for reflection. Yes?
Sorry, you said that unless the person has an obstruction. So how would one know if one has an obstruction?
I think usually it would be people who just have no interest in the Buddha's teaching or in cultivating wholesome qualities. There are people like that. Pretty.
No, because you said that, if you're doing all of these things, it should result in, bearing fruit unless you have some kind of obstruction. Is it possible that one could have an obstruction? How would one know? Is it possible that there might be an obstruction or, some kind of black cloud per se, that perhaps there are forces working against you that you might not know are there? Is there anything one can do to overcome that? Sorry, I don't know if I'm being...
Yeah. So, that's, it's pretty much going to be the case for everybody. Actually, what the Buddha teaches is that the bad karmic seeds that a person has planted, when we start to do good actions, then those start to ripen right away. That's why we have this kind of classic metaphor in religious teachings where you get tested. Right when you start to want to do good things, all these bad things start to come up.
Yeah.
And so that's the ripening, and the Buddha says that's the ripening of bad karma. It's like when a person, the metaphor that he gives is like, it's maybe like a bit like a loan, right? When you have a student loan, you're in school, you don't have to pay the government as long as you're in school. But then when you get out and you get a job, you get your first bill. And it's kind of a similar way. When you start doing good things, these kind of karmic bills start to come in. But it's better to pay them off without interest. The interest keeps building, they're bigger. So this is the kind of this is the Buddhist explanation for that classic thing about testing. And then the solution to that is to practice through them. And to use the various tools and techniques that the Buddha offers to overcome whatever difficulties might present themselves. Yeah. Okay, so we can do a little bit of meditation. All right. Okay, so is anybody here meditating for the first time, or everybody's meditated before? All right, very good. Bhante has, he's been doing this a long time, has many experienced people who've been coming for a while, so I think everybody knows what to do. So we can just straighten our back a bit and look about 3 feet in front of us and close our eyes. And can focus in on the breath. Can know when it's coming in and know when it's going out. If we breathe in a long breath, can just know I'm breathing in a long breath. And if we breathe in a short breath, can just know I'm breathing in a short breath. And can focus in on the breath at the tip of the nose. And if notice any patterns of tension or tightness around the nose or the face, you can just let those relax. And when breathing in and out from the tip of the nose, it can be helpful to change one's perception of the breath a bit. Sometimes can imagine the breath almost as if it's in front and one is watching it. But instead can change perception so that it's almost like one is right in the center of the breath. Almost like one is standing under a waterfall. So on the in-breath, one can be totally immersed by the breath. On the out-breath, one can be totally immersed by the breath. And can try to make mindfulness as continuous as possible. Being aware all the way through the in-breath. As the in-breath turns to the out-breath, all the way through the out-breath. And as the out-breath turns to the in-breath again. Trying to make mindfulness as continuous as possible. And can shift the tension a bit. This time up to the area between the eyebrows. And if notice any patterns of tension or tightness between the eyebrows, You can just let those relax. And can practice breathing in and out from this area between the eyebrows. And when breathing in and out from between the eyebrows, can be helpful to change one's perception of the breath. So that it's not just air that one is pulling in and out of the lungs, but it's a kind of energy that's all around and coursing through the body. And is possible to pull it into and out of any part of the body one might like. Through skin, through skull, almost as if there was a little mouth there between the eyebrows, pulling in breath energy from all directions. And can shift attention a bit. This time up to the crown of the head. And this is just the area at the top of the head, in the center there. And if notice any patterns of tension or tightness at the crown of the head, can just let those relax. You can practice breathing in and out from this area at the crown of the head. And when breathing in and out from the crown of the head, can be helpful to change one's perception of the breath. So that it's not just air that one is pulling in and out of the lungs, but it's a kind of energy that's all around and coursing through the body. And is possible to pull it into and out of any part of the body one might like. Through skin, through the skull. Almost as if there was a little mouth there at the crown of the head, pulling in breath energy from all directions. And can shift attention again. This time down to the area between the eyebrows. And can follow the same steps again there. So if notice any patterns of tension or tightness between the eyebrows, you can just let those relax. And you can practice breathing in and out from this area between the eyebrows. Almost as if there was a little mouth there, pulling in breath energy from all directions. And can shift attention again. This time back down to tip of the nose. And can follow the same steps again there. So if you notice any patterns of tension or tightness around the nose or the face, you can just let those relax. And you can practice breathing in and out from this area at the tip of the nose. Pulling in breath energy from all directions. And can shift attention again. This time down to center of the chest. And this is just the area to the right of the heart, in the center there. And you can follow the same steps again there. So if you notice any patterns of tension or tightness at the center of the chest, you can just let those relax. And can practice breathing in and out from the center of the chest, almost as if there was a little mouth there, pulling in breath energy from all directions. And can shift attention again. This time down to the belly button. And can follow the same steps again there. So if you notice any patterns of tension or tightness around the belly button, stomach, can just let those relax. And can practice breathing in and out from this area at the belly button. Almost as if there was a little mouth there, pulling in breath energy from all directions. And can shift attention again. This time down to base of one's body. And this is the area just in front of the hip bones, at the bottom of the body. And can follow the same steps again there. And can shift attention again. This time can watch the breath. as it comes in through the nose, down past center of the chest, past the belly button, to base of the body and back again. And when watching the breath in this way, it can be helpful to let one's focus loosen a bit so that it can take in a little bit wider area. And when breathing in and out in this way, you might have noticed an area that felt particularly comfortable to breathe from. Could have been the crown of the head, between the eyebrows, tip of the nose, center of the chest, belly button, base of one's body, or it could have been anywhere in between. And if that's the case, one can just let awareness rest on the area that felt comfortable to breathe from. And if no area in particular stood out as being comfortable, particularly comfortable, one can just ask the question, where would be a really comfortable place to breathe from? And then one can just let one's awareness settle there on its own. And from the place where it felt comfortable to breathe from, one can let awareness expand until it fills one's whole body. And one of the metaphors they give in the canon for letting comfortable feelings spread through the body is like a lake with an underground source. And the water comes up from the underground source and fills the whole lake. And in the same way, one can let awareness and feelings of comfort spread until they fill one's whole body. And with awareness, feelings of comfort filling the whole body, one can practice whole body breathing. And when practicing whole body breathing, it can be helpful to change one's perception of the breath, so that it's not just air that one is pulling in and out of the lungs, but it's a kind of energy that's all around and coursing through the body, and is possible for one to pull it into and out of every pore. And so on the in-breath, one can think whole body. On the out-breath, one can think whole body. if the mind wanders off to past or the future, you can just gently bring it back to the present moment, to the breath. And before we finish meditating, can spread thoughts of goodwill, wishing may all beings, all around everywhere, be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make our minds infinite, can make them unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every dimension. May all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. Okay, and you can open your eyes. And if you need to stretch legs or hands, please feel free.